All right, we're live. Hey, Don, how are you today?
Good, Libby. Great to be with
Good.
you.
Good to have you here. Thank you for spending your time with me, with us. We'll see who's there with us today. Um, so, welcome everyone tuning in. Thank you for being with us. We hope you find this session today helpful. I'm Libby V, nonprofit champion and founder of Libby V and Associates, a nonprofit consulting firm. And we like to help nonprofit leaders achieve more success. So, whether they need to raise more money, have more impact, learn how to be board members better, whatever it is, for most things, we can help do that. One thing we don't help with is financials, and that's why Don's here with us today. So, we also know that not all nonprofits can hire a consultant. So I created the Nonprofit Coffee Talk as a way to just provide great content and access to great folks like Don who can help you. And I hope you find it useful. Always feel free to suggest topics or speakers you'd like to see, including yourself if you'd like to be on. I'd love to have you, so reach out to me. And today I'm very excited to have Donald Wells, president of Wells CPA. And we're just going to have a great conversation about probably all things nonprofit financials. That's my guess. Um, so, welcome, Don.
Thank you, Libby. And again, I love the fact that you do a coffee talk and you give content away. You and I both are in agreement that this is one of the greatest services that we can do for the nonprofit sector. So I really appreciate you investing that way.
Oh, thank you. And you do the same thing. You have a great podcast where you provide incredible information. Your website has a ton of stuff on it. You
Well,
put
maybe
out a
you'll send me
lot
a
of stuff.
link to this and I'll put it on my website too.
Thank you. Thank you. That would be great. And I have a blog now too, which is new. And my next thing, and I'm so excited about it, and you do this really well too, is I'm putting together a newsletter that'll
Oh,
have a
good,
lot of great stuff, just a lot
good.
of good freebies and good articles, and you're going to be in there for sure. I'm going to link to you as well. So
Thank you. Thank you. That's
yeah,
awesome.
and I'm yeah, and so yeah, we love to give help. I mean, that's why we're in this business, is to be helpful. So it's very meaningful, for I know, for both Don and for me too. So just a little bit about Don. So Don's been practicing in the field of accounting for 30 years. You're not that old, Don. I know. And in that time, he worked at several accounting firms, including some big ones: Price Waterhouse, Schneider Downs, and Hemphill and Associates. And so, for the past 25 years, Donald has worked extensively in food service, oil and gas, automobile industry, nonprofit, manufacturing, and middle market industries. And then in 2015, he started his own CPA firm, and located here in Columbus, Ohio, where I am as well. And he provides services to about, is it still 200 nonprofits?
You know what, Libby? It's the most recent number we have is closer to 270.
Holy cow.
Is that crazy?
Wow. I can't even imagine. That's
In
impressive.
2015, when we started, I still have the list. 37.
Oh, wow. Well, there's so much need for it. And not everybody, not all CPAs understand nonprofit financials, and it's different, isn't it?
It
There are
is.
nuances to it.
It
So,
is. It absolutely is.
yeah. And aside from that, we just talked about how Don likes to give back. He's been serving on several boards in Central Ohio, and was appointed to the state of Ohio's Audit Committee, which is quite an honor. He has a bachelor's degree from West Virginia Wesleyan College, and is a CPA in the state of Ohio. So pretty impressive stuff.
I'm just,
Um,
I'm just getting through
so
the day, Libby. Just getting through the day.
right, it has been such a pleasure to get to know you personally a little bit too, and I look forward to doing that more. Donald and I are in kind of a couple groups together where we're nonprofit consultant type of folks, and we just are trying to figure out how to help more. That's
Mhm.
always the goal, is trying to help that community in a more profound way. So, and funny enough, Regina Al Hassan, I just mentioned her to you.
Yes,
She is on watching and just commented, "Great to see Dawn on as a guest." So she
yeah,
knows you,
that's
which is wonderful. Yeah. Donald, I want to financials from my seat, and I'm sure you agree, but I want to ask you, it is like it's probably the top pain point. I'm
awesome.
sure it is the top pain point in nonprofits. There's always this hustle to raise money, then they have to spend it in the right ways, and money has strings attached to
Yeah,
it. Typically,
yeah.
some have no strings, but or few, and some have a lot, and it's not an easy thing to keep track of all that, and people tend to, for the most part, have money scripts that are unhealthy,
Mhm,
from what we've learned
mhm.
growing up and things like that and seeing our parents. And so, I just wonder, how do you approach this work with nonprofits, and sort of what advice do you have for them, and what are kind of some things to look for, think about? And we can take this wherever you want to take it, by the way. But just kind of talk to me about your work with nonprofits and what you're seeing out there.
Libby, great. I would say that financials are either the first or second behind fundraising, right? Every nobody raises enough money, but then once we raise it, we don't necessarily know how to account for it. And one of the things that you said was that some money has strings attached, some money don't. I think that one of the things that I try to communicate with nonprofits, and it's a hard lesson, is that not all money is good money. Not all money is good money. I have some clients that actually turn away money because it just doesn't fit, or the strings, or the reporting is too complex. Um, One of the things that, and Libby, I've changed my terminology a little bit. I don't know if you've heard me use this new terminology. I treat all my nonprofits as entrepreneurs. I treat them as small business
Yeah.
entrepreneurs, because whether it's a for-profit or a nonprofit, what I'm learning is that that mindset of, I have a passion and I want to go and I want to do my passion, is consistent. So
Yes.
I don't see any reason to treat the nonprofit and the for-profit differently.
No.
I treat them very much the same.
Yep.
And one of the things I've been saying more and more is, hey, go get the money, boo boo. Go get the money, and then we'll figure out how to put structures behind you. Because one of the things that I'm seeing so much is that if it's budgeting, if it's accounting, if it's anything like that, it paralyzes my entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm.
And they have great ideas, great intentions,
Hmm.
but it may take them 2 years to take step one.
Yes,
And I try, and and you know this about me, I'm a different type of an accountant.
you are.
I try to tell people, just go. It's going to be awful. Whatever you do the first time is going to be awful. Um, my bride wrote a book, and she published it 3 or 4 years ago, and she wasn't ready to publish it, but I was pressing a little bit, and I said,
Uh-huh.
"Look, it's going to be bad. Just publish it."
Uh-huh.
And we were talking about it just this week. If she had waited until this week to publish it, it would still be bad.
Yeah,
You've got to do it the first time, and
that's
just
right.
free yourself up to go.
Mm-hmm.
So that's some of the things that I try to
Mm-hmm.
really get across to my nonprofit entrepreneurs that I work
I
with.
love that.
Um, from a financial statement standpoint, Libby, I try to make it really simple for them. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knows how to write a check and make a deposit,
Mm-hmm.
and I try to get them in situations where, if you know how to do those things, I can teach your accounting system to generate the reportings that you need.
Yes.
And so if you write a check and make a deposit, then
Yeah.
we can get you home. And
Yeah.
the other thing I tell them, I was just having a conversation earlier today. Every software has more bells and whistles than you need.
Exactly.
Do not go through the software training. Do not do it.
Mm-mm.
It will be overwhelming to you.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
again, probably different advice than what other accountants give.
No, it's such great advice because, okay, first of all, I've been on that same journey as an entrepreneur, right? Like the financial stuff like caused me to just freeze, like, and I finally got to the point where I could, outsource a very part-time, just on contract person to manage that for me. Oh my gosh, it just freed up everything. That's when
Yeah.
my business started flourishing,
Mhm.
and so if you have the luxury, it's absolutely worth outsourcing that piece. And so I wanted to go back to that. I love what you said about just do it, just take that first step.
Absolutely.
It's not going to be perfect. I
Mhm.
tell my clients all the time, just send me a poopy first draft.
That's right.
It doesn't matter. Just do a brain dump. We'll figure it out, but just do it, right? It's not going to look great. It's not going to be pretty. But it's the only way you learn and think about things in a deeper way is to actually do it. And you can't plan forever or think about it forever. You have to just do it.
Libby,
And
your
then
first coffee talk did not look like this.
no, it didn't. It didn't. No, I fumbled through my introduction. I still fumble through it every week, but that's okay. That's okay. I just look at this as like a sit down and have a conversation in front of
Absolutely.
a bunch of people that are watching us, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, everything gets better with when you do it repeatedly. And so you're, you know, those and what you just said, right? Those systems, you're only going to use a very fraction of it. You can set up those reports and just click a button and put in the dates, and you've got your financial reports, right? And that's about all you need.
That's right.
And so, just figure out how to do that if you're
Yeah.
going to do it yourself. And
And one of the things, Libby, very interesting. When I was with the big firms, the Price Waterhouse and things like that, we would tell people, "Hey, on day one, set it up as if you were $100 million organization. Set your
oh
processes up as if you were $100 million organization." And I don't do that anymore. I don't do that anymore. What I do is I ask clients, "Hey, let's put a group of people around you, and our job is to watch out for you and let you
mhm,
know, hey, you need to accomplish these two or three things. And
mhm.
then once you have that accomplished, we'll feed you two or three more. We'll
Yeah.
continue." It's overwhelming, Libby. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but I have a list of IRS, Attorney General, and Accounting and Better Business Bureau. What would it take at a high level to stay compliant with those four?
Oh my gosh.
It's a list of 42 items. All right. If you can hit these 42 items, but 42 people are 42. I've shared that list with one person who who's now running a nonprofit, was in charge of a $4 million investment practice. Right, he had like $4 million under investments,
Yeah.
and he looked at the list and was overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Like, Don, this is too much. I need you to break it down smaller.
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
It's a
So
lot.
I don't. What I want is I want people to be free enough to go and do what they need to do.
Right.
Surround themselves with folks like you, who will say, "Hey, you've accomplished this. This is what's coming next down the road. This is how we prepare for it ahead of time."
Mhm.
And I think that's the best advice that I could ever give. Instead of somebody wanting to do it perfectly on day one, have somebody around you that's just looking out for you.
Yeah. That's really smart advice. And I know for a fact that you make this simple for your organizations. By the way, I love that you treat them as entrepreneurs because I say all the time, most nonprofits are in startup mode, and
Yeah.
that's not a negative thing necessarily. It's just the nature of the beast, I think.
Yeah.
And it's so anyway. You do make it so simple, and that's why I refer people to you, is that you speak their language, and help them to look at the things that they should be looking at, and know what to not look at,
Yeah.
which is really important. Um, Yeah, I totally agree with you, and I say to people all the time, the nonprofit folks, this you have to get to the point where this is sustainable, and if it's just you and you're doing everything, you know, is that sustainable, right? And so getting good people around you will free you up to make it sustainable, to be
Yeah.
able to be out there doing the things that you need to do,
There's a
which
saying. Oh,
isn't
I'm sorry,
financial.
Libby. I'm sorry.
No, no, please, please.
There's a saying that I might trademark. I use it so often. Is that a nonprofit is a mission on a business platform. Um,
Oh,
if it's a mission on a mission platform, it is deemed and doomed to fail. It can't be
yes.
a mission on a mission platform. It has to
Mhm.
be a mission on a business platform, um, and it's hard. I've had conversations before, especially in the art business or the art
Yeah.
industry. It was probably, I don't know, 8 years ago at Wild Goose. I was doing a presentation at Wild Goose.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and these artists came in and they're like, yeah, they want me to talk about my business. I don't have a business. It's just me doing art. I'm like, oh, no, no, no. That's a business. The Internal Revenue Service, the state of Ohio, we all treat you as a business,
Mhm.
and you don't have to understand it all, but you need
Mhm.
to start thinking about, okay, how am I running my business and
Yeah.
what am I trying to accomplish?
Yeah. For some reason, I attract a lot of people who want to start a nonprofit. And so, that's one of the first questions I ask them is, do you want to run a business or do you want to do what you do, whatever it is, right? Art,
Right.
help people, whatever it is, rescue dogs, whatever that is. And, because that's an important thing to think through before you start a nonprofit.
It is a great distinction to make, and I've gone back and looked, and I've softened my stance a little bit on it because I haven't done an exact count, but I believe that if you look at the Ohio Revised Code, which are the laws
Mhm.
that govern the state of Ohio, there's more written about nonprofits than any other business.
It
Uh,
is
It is
so
it is the hardest business to run.
it is. It's so regulated. There's so much red tape. And like you said, so much compliance stuff that, it takes almost a full-time person, focused on that all the time.
And when
Um,
someone comes to you or they come to me, if they want to run a program, that's not a negative comment.
right.
That's a real great. And you and I can find someplace where they're able to go run that
Yes.
program, right?
Yes.
We've got enough clients, we've got enough nonprofits, we know enough people,
Yes.
or we can find a place for you to go run it, so you don't have to run
Yeah.
a business. And
I tell, even if they decide they're going to do it, I say, before you do that, get a fiscal agent
yep,
and just try it out. That way you don't have to undo a 501(c)(3), which is also really complex.
really complex.
I've done that as a board member before. It's ridiculous. So, you have to think long and hard about what it is you want to do with your time, right?
hmm
And so do you want to be doing QuickBooks reports? Do you want to be, do you want to
Do
be
you want to deal with HR?
right?
Right?
Right.
Do you want to write acknowledgement letters? Do you want to thank
Yes.
donors? Do you want or and I no disrespect, or do you want to sit with the kids?
Yeah, I mean, that's really critical to understand the difference and to be able to make an informed decision about that, thoughtful decision. Um, I I hope this isn't a too much of an abrupt change of topic. I'm famous for that. That's one. Um, but one of the things that I see a lot of nonprofits accidentally getting wrong. I don't want to say wrong, but maybe they don't. It's not wrong. It's like they could get in trouble easily. Is separation of duties,
Mm,
and I see that so often. Where, for example, a small nonprofit, one person opens up the mail, takes out the checks, and this organization I'm thinking of in particular, they do get checks still, a lot of checks. Um, but whatever it is, they get the money, they make the deposit slips, they make the deposits, they enter the gifts into the donor database. They're doing everything right, and that's not a good practice, right? You can get into trouble pretty easily, and that's how fraud has happened in those cases that we see. Can you talk a little bit about separation of duties? Because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding. And why?
Yeah.
Why do we need them? And what
Yeah.
should we have in place?
So this is the very first place I'll start with that conversation is that if you're a nonprofit, um, you should have at least three board members. So you can never tell me that there's only one person. There's always a minimum of four, right? You got somebody doing it, and you got three, or at least three. There's a minimum of
Yes,
three people. So
that's right.
now the question is, okay, how do we separate these duties? And it
Yeah.
really, and I'm if anybody's out there, get in touch with Libby. Libby, put them in touch with me. I have from the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants the ways that you could take tasks in a two office environment up to a four office environment and split them up so that it's approved by the American Institute that you've got good separation of duties.
Yeah.
What you don't want is the big picture is that you need to look at a process and you say, okay, I don't want this process to be one where someone could do something incorrectly and we not know about it. If you have a process like that, then you don't have good separation of duties. Like Libby said, all right, somebody opens the mail, somebody makes a deposit, that same person keeps your accounting records and they get the bank statement. Well,
Mhm.
at that point, we don't like to think about it, but when they open the mail, if there's a check in there that they took out of that, when they made the deposit, nobody would know. When they recorded it, no one would know. When the bank statement came, everything would be in line, and you would think the financials were all good. So
Mhm.
you want to look at processes like that. I have a couple of clients that do festivals, and just horrific trying to get good policies and procedures in place for separation of duties at a festival when you have walk up people that might be paying cash, literally paying cash.
Right.
And we have to figure out, all right, do we need a ticket? Do we need to reconcile tickets to know that we gave away 400 tickets their way? We should have this much money. um,
Mhm.
you have to think about that, or you should think about those things,
Mhm.
because I did this before the pandemic, Libby, and it's really the way that I started to grow my business. Is that I would go to the Columbus Dispatch, and at least once a week you could find an article about a nonprofit having a uh, misstep, and I
Yes.
would publish them all. I would go back, and if you go back and you look at my old social media stuff, I would publish them all. And then I would ask one question: how would you know if this was happening?
Right.
And I really challenge people to think through. My mom always told me that, hey, Don, somebody else getting in trouble and you learning from that is probably the best experience you could get.
Mhm.
One of the things that I would recommend, Libby, and I'm sure that you know this, but the Ohio Attorney General has a quarterly newsletter.
Mhm.
In that newsletter, they publish investigations that they've done and results that have come from those investigations. I
Yeah.
use those investigations as checks for separation of duties.
Yeah. That's
I go
great.
back and I go to my clients and say, okay, if this was going on, how would you know?
Right.
And they say, well, we wouldn't. I'm like, okay, that means we don't have good separation of duties. We got to figure out how to
Right.
do that.
Yeah.
So use those experiences to help you figure out where you don't have great separation of duties.
Yes, because people who end up doing things like that, stealing from a nonprofit organization, they don't, it's not like you look at them and tell and can see that they're gonna steal. Like they're not bad people. They might be desperate people. They might be people who've run across some real life struggle. They're not, but you can't know that when it's going to happen or by whom.
Well, and in the accounting world, we're taught that fraud usually takes place, or someone usually does something like that when there's opportunity and when
Hmm.
there's rationale. And in the
Hmm.
nonprofit space, that rationale exists a lot because most people are underpaid.
Yes.
So there's always a rationale for I need more because I'm doing too much. So
Right.
now it's about, and there's not a whole lot we can do about that. There's not a whole lot we can do with that rationale piece because most people are underpaid. My staff's
That's
truly
true. Yeah.
probably underpaid, right?
Yeah.
So we have to focus on the opportunity and limit the
Hmm.
opportunities
Hmm.
for someone to act out.
Yeah. And I also think, is it true too that often it happens because somebody's having financial struggles and they say, I'm just going to borrow this and I'll put it back.
Yeah.
But then they get away with it.
Yep.
So they're like, well,
Yep.
okay, I'll pay it back later,
Yeah.
but they never pay it back. And then they do it again because they got away with it.
And I call those short-term loans.
Yeah.
And I will tell you that if you're out there and you're listening to this, you're like, we don't need to worry about that because we have an audit. An audit will never, should never find short-term loans that people are taking.
Right.
Um, I can walk you through it. I've got a podcast that talks about why an audit is not structured to find that. If you look at your audit agreements that you sign, my agreement says it is your responsibility to tell me about any fraud when I begin the engagement. It's not my responsibility to find it. And
That's right.
people place reliance on these other things to cover off on their responsibilities.
People think the audit that's the purpose, that
Yeah.
it's to make sure that there's no fraud. And it is not. And it's not going to uncover that stuff. You have to be responsible, right? The ED and the board for setting up those separation of duties and processes and systems that help you avoid
Yeah.
that. Thank you for making that point.
We had was it last year, 2 years ago, to Columbus Zoo, right? Huge
Yes.
issues. And here's what I will tell you. The audit firm that does Columbus Zoo is top notch. Is
Yep.
absolutely top notch.
Yes.
And if you go back and you read all the newspaper and all the writings and the attorney general's report on it and all that, the audit firm was clean.
Hmm.
They were not at fault for anything
Hmm.
because they were not supposed to find what was
That's right.
taking place. That's not their
Yeah.
role.
No. No. I mean, you can hire, what's the right term? Forensic, folks who can come in and maybe find
Yeah.
fraud, but that's their specialty. Auditors are not there to do that.
No,
It's an important distinction to make,
and at
too.
the big companies, Ohio State,
Hmm.
Ohio Health, they have internal audit departments that are
Hmm.
constantly looking for that stuff.
Yeah.
That's what they do.
Yeah.
Small organizations, you don't have that. So
You got to set up the right systems and
you have
processes.
to set
That's
up the
it.
right systems with the board.
And those, by the way, Don, those separation of duties documents that I got from you at one point are so good. I've shared them with several clients.
Good.
They're really, really helpful. So I want to just say, everybody out there, if you want those, I'm happy to get them to you. So, um, uh, just reach out to me and I'll get them. They're excellent. All right. So, any final words? We're going to start winding down here in just a minute. It goes by so fast, doesn't it?
It does way fast. And you know what, Libby, we didn't even talk about real financial statement stuff.
I
Crazy.
know.
Maybe I'll come back and we'll dive into
Please
specific
come back.
financial statement stuff. The
Please come
only
back.
thing I will say, I'll leave you with this from a financial statement standpoint. People ask me all the time, hey, Don, how do I set my books up? How do I do this? How do I do that? Here's how you want to do it. You want to do it based upon what you want to track, so what you budget, and your tax reporting.
Hmm.
Tax reporting, so go and look at your tax return, set things up so that you can easily do that, and then around what you want to track. Uh, just your tracking and what you want to keep track of as an entrepreneur will tell you how to set up your financial statements.
And all of you go to Don's website because there's so much helpful stuff on it. So much. It's incredible.
Thank you,
And
Lou.
that'll help a lot too. So tell us your website and then I will also put it in the chat.
Yep, it's Wells, Wells CPAOH.com. Wells CPAOH.com. And
Yeah.
if you go to that website, you'll find two different sections. One is called, I think it's called a nonprofit forum, where you can get hour-long presentations that have been done for the Clemens Foundation. And
Hmm.
then the other is podcast, where we
Yeah.
try to do shorter snippets of information.
I go to your website all the time.
So thank
I
you.
go there a lot to like find a podcast or an article, or I've looked at the Columbus Foundation stuff for different things that pop up, right? It's just full, it's just chock full of information. So thank you for that. And thank you so much for being on today. I so appreciate your time. I know it's precious.
Thank you,
Um,
Libby.
yeah, thank you. And hey, I'll join us next week, June 8th, when our guest will be Anna Bitters of Anna Bitters LLC. And this is kind of an opposite type of topic, not really, but we're going to discuss how powerful clarity, creativity, and connection can be in the nonprofit space. So join us next week and have a great week, Dawn, and everybody out there.
Thank you, Libby. Hey,
All
thank
right,
you,
take
everybody, for
care.
being here.
Yeah, thank you. All right, bye.
Bye.